everyone. Welcome. Thank you for joining us for our fourth episode now of our Webinar Wednesday series. Last week, we had a couple of our technicians chatting on the science behind hemp drying and our hemp drying systems, as well as an exciting announcement about our dryer's effect on terpenes. You can find a recording of that webinar on our Facebook and then also on our YouTube channel as well. This week, we have three extremely knowledgeable hemp farmers joining us as they discuss their experiences from last year, successes, hardships, especially relating to the drying industry. We'll also have an open question and answer at the end of this presentation. So if you think of any questions along the way, feel free to type them in the question and answer section at the bottom. Thank you, LaVerne, Chip, and Devin for joining us. Let's get started. Let's get started with some introductions. If you wouldn't mind just kind of letting us know what your company does, what your role in your company is. Do you farm your own hemp? What other services do you offer your customers? So let's get started with maybe LaVerne.
Okay, thank you. I'm so glad to be here. Thanks for inviting us. My company is Hemp Solutions Group. We're a research-based group in Northern Illinois. We focus on whole plant use from cannabinoid to seed, protein to fiber. And our goal is to help expand the whole hemp use in a positive revenue application. So that's kind of the overlying goal. Now, what you need to know is on our site, my brother-in-law and nephews own and operate a corn and bean production business. On that farm in 2019, they grew approximately 30 plus acres of feminized hemp with the goal of learning best practices and trying to establish some mechanization elements to make it be something that can function long term. So I guess what you need to hear from me, first of all, we don't have all the answers. We're still a work in progress. I think the most important thing to know is that on that journey, we had a lot of learnings, and we just try to capitalize on those learnings as we move forward. So we have four other LLCs on our property, all part of the farm drying, growing operation, and all together we just kind of fall under the Hemp Solutions Group. So I got to say, give credit to all the rest of the people that helped make this thing happen. Our operational LLC toll dried and stored hemp biomass for people in our neighborhood and our community, formed a little network last year, and we field tested, process tested, and we also offer some CO2 extraction on our site. So that's a little bit about us.
Perfect. Let's take it to maybe Chip next.
Sure. My name is Chip Wernig. I am the one of three owners of Palisade Farms LLC, located in Palisade, Colorado, which is the western slope of our great state. The other owners include my wife Catherine and my father Chip Sr. It's the three of us that put Palisade Farms together. My role is president, operator, everything. Weed puller. Yeah, you're right. Stuff like that, but we do farm hemp. We operate on about 150 acres outdoor, and we also purchased 1 year ago a operational greenhouse that's 100,000 square feet. It's called Orchard Mesa Greenhouse. We call it OMG for short, and it's just down the street from our farm headquarters. That facility has really put us in a great position, I think, for this industry, because we're basically able to produce all the clones we need, seed starts we need, and we can also sell them. So going into other services, that question there, we offer all types of greenhouse services. We produce indoor crops inside, clones, seedlings. We supply other farmers with fertilizer that we buy in bulk, other supplies that they need, irrigation supplies, plastic mulch, things like that. We have consulting services to some degree, both on the greenhouse side and also on the cultivation side. And then we do offer harvest services. with our dryer. We have an IEC 3000S system, and it's been great.
Awesome. Thank you for sharing. What about you, Devin?
Okay, so we are Southern Harvest Services. We started with 38 acres the last growing season in South Carolina. We planted and harvested that material. We have about 11,000 pounds of dry biomass in our warehouse facility right now. South Carolina decided to not go with the existing farm bill and change the rules here and decided to let the DEA run the program. So we're not planting this year. We are drying. We have a drying facility here. We're expanding into Kentucky. We have customers in Maryland, Virginia, South Carolina, and Kentucky. And our primary focus this season will be drying, toll drying.
Awesome. Thank you all for sharing. So getting into a little bit of dryer research, what research did you do before purchasing a dryer? What other drying options did you consider? I know there's lots and lots of dryers on the market. What were things that you were looking for specifically in your research? Let's start off with LaVerne again.
Okay, well, the research that we focused on, really we were intent on, retaining and preserving the cannabinoid and terpene elements in the biomass. Our goal last year was targeted more for biomass for oil extraction. And I guess that's a little bit different now. As we go into this season, we're probably looking more at the whole plant. But temperature management and the drying process and the physical manipulation of the biomass, those were elements that we looked at pretty close in dryer selection. Second thing we looked at was capacity. We want to get to a mechanized stage here, and to do that, just large volumes need to come in and be dried, and we weren't going to be content with a smaller system that would be more of a batch sort of thing. And then I think third, in my mind, something that was going to be scalable. Last year was our first year, and we prepared for what if we can do something larger in years ahead. Can we add another dryer? Do we have a building? Can we put them in the same facility? That mattered to us. And then I think fourth, even from a farming standpoint, my brother-in-law and nephews brought this forward, like when it's time to go, it's time to go. So we wanted something that's pretty reliable. So those were probably the four factors that I think we considered as a team.
Great points. Thank you for sharing. Chip, did you have a similar experience?
Oh yeah, sure. I mean, first of all, there are many, many ways of taking a hemp plant and cutting it from the field, and then drying it and getting that biomass / flour into a state that's ready, that's extraction ready. Many, many ways to do that. But for us, in the scale we're at, it made the most sense for us to have one continuous throughput. Just have the field, the plants come out of the field, they're in a bale in a warehouse that same day. With other methods, you have many other steps involved to get the biomass put up. And so we had done a lot of those different methods. And this 2020 is our fourth season planting. And we grew over the 3 seasons that we did, and we learned a lot. We've hung plants, we've field dried plants, we've done it all. Different ways of taking that off there, bucking. And for us, we made a decision early 2019 that we were going to primarily rely on our dryer. We do have other backup methods. We have a combine, we have things like that. We have greenhouse space we could hang in a pinch. The research we did, we basically just scoured the internet for any information we could find. We read every hemp thing, email, magazine, everything. Tried to get enough information, then I just started calling people, talking to them about it. We went to some demos. We went to an IEC demo in Colorado Springs, I think February of 2019, and we put our order in March. And So we were considering some other stuff, but the folks that we were interacting with at IEC and the information that we were exchanging back and forth really made that decision pretty easy for us.
Awesome. I'm happy to hear that. What about you, Devin?
So with us, it was all about, it's a lot like Chip and LaVerne have said. We looked for something that was plant friendly. Temperature was a factor. Continuous drying was a factor. We did the same thing with the bales. We went to Oregon. We have a relationship with a grower out there. They do about 2,000 acres. And they kind of steered us down the path with a crone chopper and got us into where our product would feed through this type of dryer really well. We toured a few facilities with the IEC dryers. We looked at the pizza oven style dryer. We looked at the steam dryer. We looked at some things that didn't really seem to work for us until we saw the way this thing works. And we went with the IEC thermo dryer, and we feel like it's the best move for us. We're looking to add 8 dryers over the next 2 years to our business plan. So that's how we got here, and that's the path we intend to stay on.
Thank you all for sharing. Really, really great points. So as you all mentioned, you all did end up purchasing an IEC dryer. You all have the 3000S, which is our smallest model that does about 3,000 wet pounds per hour. You had kind of touched on some of the determining factors being capacity, made in America, service. Was there anything else you wanted to touch on? What really drove you to IEC specifically? Let's start with LaVerne again.
Well, I think, as the others have mentioned, the other options, I mean, there's a delineation between all the different options that exist out there. So if you want to go mechanized, I mean, take away the hang dry operation. I mean, you're basically down to batch box dryers, the pizza, somebody said that pizza, the traveling conveyor, there's rotary kilns out there too. And then the IEC. I think between all of them, in my opinion, and I come from an industry prior that the whole cyclones, the air pneumatic transfer stuff, I'm totally familiar with that. It caught my attention. I think that was probably the biggest factor when it go from more manual to try to go to mechanized thing, and you really need a continuous flow, and you need something that's got capacity, sustained capacity, and I didn't see that in the other options that we had. So this is why we landed there. A little more sophisticated system, in my opinion. We can talk about that in a little bit, but I kind of really like that. So I think you're asking me, why did we choose the IEC hemp dryer? I've got a couple points on that. One, I really like the multi-phased aspect of the IEC dryer. You have multiple heat sources that can be controlled independently. You've got a first stage and a second stage, and the others do not offer that option. And it seemed to me that having 2 unique heat sources and the air movement systems, with the cyclones, the air movement, the pneumatic conveyance, you're putting these fragile particles in suspension, and they're basically floating through a drying system. That's a lot different than tumbling around in a dryer, in a box, and air is not moving around all the particles. It just seemed to me like having the particles in suspension, moving through rather quickly from one end to the other, and then being able to manage the temperature, the heat and the airflow, gave you a whole lot more variables that one could say are a problem to manage, but in my opinion, they're an asset when you're trying to really dial into unique biomasses and dry in unique ways. So that was pretty good for us. So multi-phase, general on the biomass. The other thing that I really liked about it was, and we weren't familiar with it before we had it in hand, but that whole PLC control panel is very user-friendly. An operator can stand there and see every electric motor, every burner, and it can be adjusted on the go. So really like that. again, I'll just say again, reliability and support, all USA components. We didn't see that in the others. And that's a big deal for us. And I sound like it is for the other gentlemen as well. So, and then the fifth thing for me was the flexibility in design. We actually, my construction group actually physically built ours. We bought the components and we physically erected it. So when we got ready to operate, we were pretty intimate with the whole system, and then understanding how it functioned, it was easy to make minor adjustments. But we had a pretty good hands-on just from building the thing on our site and fitting it in the building. So I think those were the primary things that we pulled out of it. So.
Awesome. I'm happy to hear that. Chip, did you have a relatively similar experience?
I couldn't have said it better myself, LaVerne. Thanks. Those factors were also considerations for us. You know, the throughput in the control panel, all that stuff is wonderful. I wasn't about, you know, a lot of other guys I know were buying these, you know, shitty dryers from China, and you just look at these things and you know that you're going to have problems with them, and you know you're not going to be able to get them to run, you know, that kind of thing. So we didn't want to be, you know, taking the cheap side and then wish we would have done something different. So, you know, and we also constructed it ourselves, which was, I think, a very worthwhile experience because it was not very smooth. I mean, we had to diagnose things, come up with solutions, get it going. You know, I mean, just like any type of industrial installation or machinery, you know, sure. It's not just plug and play, but you got to put the time into it to figure it out. And once we did that, I mean, our guys were just top notch in doing that. So.
I'm happy to hear that. That's a really great point that you bring. All three of you actually chose to handle your own install. So it's very interesting to hear that it helped you to familiarize yourself with the system long before it was ever even plugged in. Devin, did you have a similar experience?
Very similar. It's funny, we have a construction group as well, so we erected our dryer. One of the nice things about the IEC dryer is you can pretty much set it up in any configuration you want as long as your throughput flows the way it's supposed to. So we shrunk our footprint down to about 1,400 square feet just for the dryer in a 5,000 square foot building. And so, you know, we were able to move things around and condense it. And now in our new plan, they're going to be spread out over a longer distance with more pipe and, you know, for the drying to take effect in the first phase. As LaVerne was mentioning, the two phases, the primary phase is the most important, we feel, to keep that product moving and keep it at a constant drying. So we're trying to maintain around 8%, 8 to 10 coming out of the dryer at the back end. And that piping is nice that we can configure that however we want to without a set plan. When you get a box dryer or what basically is a manure dryer or an asphalt dryer, the big tumble dryers, you're stuck with that footprint. You don't have a choice. So we like that about the IEC dryer. We could turn it around in a big circle if we wanted to, and everything comes out the way it's supposed to as long as you time it and temperature it the way it needs to be done.
Awesome. All great points. I agree. We think it's pretty great ourselves. Toll drying. So you guys, did you use your dryer to toll dry for any other farmers in your area? Was that originally your plan, or did your business plan kind of shift a little bit as you started? LaVerne?
I think when we began, our goal was to make sure that we had a vertically integrated business plan, that if we're going to grow, we didn't have any drying facilities available to us. We knew we needed to dry it. We needed to store it, climate control storage. And then at that point last year, we didn't have any extractors in our area either. So we decided, well, modestly, we need to at least have an extraction facility to cover ourselves. When we moved into it, the word hit the street, and we kind of had a network of neighbors and people in the community that kind of came to us then and said, would you dry? And our dryer group chose to do that. So yes, we custom toll dried for a fair amount of clients. So that did occur. Was that our master plan? I think it was probably a sub issue in our plan. The main goal was like, if we're going to grow this stuff, we need to be able to do something versus stick it in the ground, grow it, and worry about it in the fall and decide how we're going to manage it. So we had a pretty complete business plan in place for that. So the answer is yes, it included toll drying. So, and then you're asking, has the plan changed since then? I think yes. I mean, we're going to continue. I think the other gentleman said the same thing. I think all three of us are aggressively ready to toll dry again this year and dry for others. So, I mean, we've got room to do that. I think the other part of the plan going into 2020 for us in Illinois is we're focused. There's a lot of people in our area as well as ourselves, and we're going to be strong proponents for it. And that's a multi-purpose hemp plant. So not just oil harvest off of it, but maybe a dual purpose harvest for oil and seed, or even the triple purpose plants where we're some fiber as well. So if we can get to that point, and we are going to in our area this year, how do we have a dryer that's capable of handling different biomass forms if that's what the market's heading towards? So our business plan, the Hemp Solutions Group, is really focused on that. We've been doing a lot of research in that area and adding some components to the drying system to be able to accommodate that. So in that regard, toll drying, I think, is expanding in our area, if that makes sense.
Very interesting. So the toll drying opportunities in Illinois are pretty considerable. Are you seeing something similar in Colorado, Chip?
Yeah, we are. We did toll dry for, I think, 3 customers last year total. We had some other people we were talking to, but I wasn't fully comfortable with the operation of the dryer as we were nearing harvest season. So I declined potential business and customers because I didn't want to leave them hanging. And this year we will do some toll drying. Our plan was originally to do more in 2019, but we did some. And our customers were real pleased with it. They had really good results with extraction and so forth. So yeah, we're going to do some more drying for some clients this year. And who knows? We're just having those conversations now. So we plan on doing that. We also would like to maybe put up a twin or a mirror and have 2 machines going at once. That's in our thought process right now. But what I found is that when talking to people about drying, and then it comes down to how many dollars per dry weight pound, and I sat down and did the math on my previous 2 years where we had a lot of hand labor and what it cost us to harvest. And then I kind of averaged that out, and then I attached a convenience premium to it, because there is something to be said about being able to just either drop off your plants somewhere and have them come back to you in the form of dried material and not even have to worry about it. There's a convenience premium that's associated with that, in my opinion. And everyone paid the prices that we quoted them, and that might be a little different this year, but we'll see.
Absolutely, great points. Devin, I know you got your dryer a little bit later in the year. Were you able to do some toll drying? Was that your plan?
Well, we started out, that we started down that path, and we were kind of on that 12 to 16 week lead time. And then Shauna pulled a rabbit out of her hat and got us one in about 4 weeks, and pushed our plan forward. Pushed it forward just a little bit faster, which was great. It worked out really well for us, and it did allow us to do some toll drying on top of drying our own product. And the experience with the dryer has pushed us to move that plan even further to get more dryers and expand the operation. So it has changed our business plan in a good way, a very positive way. Back to what Chip was saying, the customers this year I think they're seeing a lot different market than what they saw in the previous years. And we're on that same path. We're talking to these people and we're finding out what their comfort level is. We know what our costs are. We've broken it down to an hourly cost. And so we know, what it's going to cost us basically per pound to dry this product. And we're trying to be as fair as possible, but yet we still have dryers to pay for, and we still have people to pay, and we have a business to run. So yes, there's a premium, a convenience premium that has to be included in that. We're trying to keep an eye on that cost for the farmer, because they have to get it to processing and they still have to get it sold. So if we can incorporate the processing and the sale of the crude or the distillate or isolate at the back end to help those farmers, we're going to try to do that as well. But the dryers are key to all of that, because we're not finding very many processors that are willing to attack processing wet biomass. There's some out there doing it, but it's very expensive for them to do it in-house like that, we found. So I think if you're not drying your product ahead of your processing, you may be shooting yourself in the foot, so to speak.
All very, very good points. I especially liked how you brought up that this year is just a different year than last year. It's a different beast. And it is worth mentioning that all three of the farmers you see are, they're toll drying this year. They are accepting contracts for harvest this year. So if you know that you are going to be hemp farming this year and you haven't thought about how you're going to stabilize or dry your crop, I definitely recommend reaching out to one of these three gentlemen if they are in your area. That's just, one less thing to worry about come harvest season. Because, I know growing, it's tricky enough as it is. The last thing you want is come harvest season for all that hard work to just turn into mush. We've seen it happen, unfortunately, so definitely think through drying now while you're putting plants in the ground. Our next couple of questions are about the operation of the dryer. So how do you use your dryer in your existing process? How has the operation of your IEC dryer been? And how has the learning curve been for your operators? Was it, relatively quick? They were able to kind of wrap their brains around it? Or did it take, months and months of extensive training? What did that learning curve look like? LaVerne?
Okay, I think everybody will appreciate this, but our model before we ran the first shovel full through the machine was gradation. We were focused on gradation with people that were bringing biomass to it, as well as our own. So I think feed is key. So what I mean by that is gradation requirement. We had an established gradation requirement, and we were targeting that from the get-go. That helped us a lot. But the challenge we had in our area, in Illinois, especially in Illinois, is growers, well-meaning growers, tried to harvest their material out of the field by different means. And any load that came to us could have been either chopped with a stripper head, or combined with a stripper head. We had all forms of biomass, so we were pretty acute with looking at biomass, a sample of biomass before it arrived in our yard, and it either made gradation or it didn't. And in a lot of cases, we went back and tried to help growers modify their harvest technique to create more uniform and acceptable feed. It was a win for everyone. The dryer ran more efficiently, but most importantly, at the end of the day, if you've got dried biomass that's going to go for oil, and let's just say 40% of it is fiber, it's got to be reprocessed even if we ran it through the dryer. So most people were learning this past year in our area, and we certainly learned a lot. Truthfully, we started out with a harvest technique we were going to use, and I don't know if we did a few acres that way, but we shifted to another operation on our own, and it generated much better biomass and very consistent biomass. So we went from a chopping to a combining operation here, and was very cool. The other thing that was kind of unique to us in our area, I have my own lab on site. So we were testing biomass coming in the door, wet biomass. We were looking at 3 parameters, one gradation, but moisture content, and also cannabinoid presence. So in other words, we were not going to accept hot stuff on our property. Number one, I mean hot as in THC hot, but also gave us a chance to know exactly what we had going in the front of the dryer. After we got more efficient at, our crew got very efficient at identifying biomasses. After a period of time, the machine is so operator friendly, we were able to dial in between our data we're collecting on similar biomasses. Knowing how we set the dryer, you could dial the dryer in and pretty much leave it go if you had consistent biomass. When your biomass change, obviously that's chaotic for an operator. But we really like the, again, I'll get back to the PLC panel, the training that we had. The IAC folks told our crew in training, like start slow, start low temperatures. And of course, everyone, I'm sure you other guys did the same thing. We all wanted to get out there and run it as hard as you could. We started slow, but we also, all of our settings were essentially data driven. When we changed the biomass, we knew what we had coming in. We played with some settings. Our guys got really good at identifying biomass, watching it go through the system. And we'd check it at the back end. We know where our moisture was. We'd be checking cannabinoid content here. So we kind of watched it from front to the back, but the system allowed us to do that. And I think we dialed it in fairly well. So I think those were some of the things we had in the learning curve, was watching the biomass and documenting what you had coming in and what was coming out the back end, and operate your plant on data, not on seat of the pants kind of dial changes here. So I think the last thing is we found it pretty effective to limit the operating engineers on the plant to like maybe 2 or 3. Just any and everyone wasn't welcome to go up and change settings on the PLC here. So we got pretty locked and loaded on settings, and only a few operators in our group physically made the changes.
All right, very interesting. Chip, did you have a pretty similar experience?
We did, yeah. Those are good points, LaVerne. You know, we have our dryer just dialed in. You know, we ended the harvest season really pleased with everything that was coming out of it. You know, and that's it makes me glad to say that, because that was a hard-fought achievement. You know, but looking back on it, you know, the learning curve wasn't as great as it seemed at the time, because we were just under the gun. You know, we had to get this thing running for harvest, and harvest every day was you know, getting closer and closer. So the problems that we faced under a normal situation wouldn't have been as dire. But that said, I mean, it wasn't really that difficult. You know, we had just what I consider to be common issues in the learning curve. I mean, how does this work? How does this work? How does this fit together? Jeff from IEC Thermo was great. He was there on site helping us. I mean, geez, 4, 5, 6 different times that he was there for a couple, 3, 4 days at a time. Always available on the phone if we needed to ask a question, walk us through things. You know, so that helped out. But, you know, and it was also the talents of our people that work for us that just, you know, whenever anything come up, let's figure it out. Let's just get it done. You know, LaVerne made a point about the operators. You know, the PLC panel that controls this thing is all touchscreen, super high tech, and, you know, lots of moving lights and stuff, you know, and it was myself and one of my guys that were the only people that were allowed to change any setting at all and basically touch the thing. Just, you know, because there's just so many things, and if one guy takes it from this temperature to this temperature and you don't know it, you switch. I mean, there's just inherent problems with that. So, you know, we're just really pleased with how we got it running. We've heard stories upon stories of other types of dryers just not even, you know, people turned them on. I know one guy that got some Chinese dryer and he turned it on, the whole engine blew out just right then and there. You know, they never even used the thing. But yeah.
Devin, did you have a pretty similar experience?
We did. We had a very similar experience to both what you guys are saying. The with the PLC panel, again, it was myself and one other operator. We kept a core group of 5 people. That we had a couple that floated in and out, but there were only 2 of us setting parameters for the dryer: speed control and temperature and airflow. One of the things that for us is the chop, like you said, LaVerne, the chop is very important. So we put we have a chrome chopper that we used in the field, and we put an agri chopper at the front of our dryer before the first conveyor to give it another chop. So anything that came to us, we were able to run through in the smaller gradation so that it would feed through the dryer. One of the things that we had a hurdle was temperature change. So we had to learn that when we had a 40-degree night all night long, because ours came in the way it did, our product was cold. So we had to figure out, where do you start? How long do you let the machine run before you feed any product into it so that all the pipe is hot, your cyclones are up to temperature, everything is there before you drop the feed in there. So there was some curve there with temperature, inside, outside temperatures. Once we got through that and the guys figured out the hold points, the feed points, and what you had to do to make sure that everything was running smoothly, it went pretty well. It took about 2 weeks for the guys to get fully versed on every little thing that we needed to change. And between myself and Jason, the other operator, we figured out the temperature thing. And so we actually took snapshots of the PLC on different days and made notes of what the outside temperature was versus, at night versus the morning when we started. So we've got those panel shots so we can go in and reset the panel to those parameters anytime we have that same condition, which we don't see sub-zero temperatures like you would in Illinois or even in Colorado, but we'll see high 20s sometimes. Mostly it's 40s and above, but that makes a big difference overnight when you start up first thing in the morning and it's been cold all night long and your product is down around 40 degrees. It makes it a little tougher, but we figured that out.
Very interesting. Thank you all for sharing. Something that I find interesting that all 3 of you have touched on is you have taken ownership of your systems. You know what I mean? You own your system, and if something doesn't work, you have taken it upon yourselves to tweak your process to make it more successful. And I think that lends a lot to why you are so successful. So good job, gold star. So let's take a look back at the last year. We all learned so much in 2019. What was the biggest challenge that you had to overcome? And what would you do differently if you could do it again regarding drying? I did hear a couple of themes where some people felt like maybe they were under the gun with harvest coming so quickly. Is that something you may have done differently? Maybe started the drying or the dryer shopping process a little bit earlier? What do you think? What was your experience, LaVerne?
Great question. In Illinois, we had a challenge last spring in 2019. Our state didn't actually issue permits until the last Tuesday in April. So for some of us, we were holding off to see if we could actually get a permit before we ordered a dryer or actually had seed shipped into us. So in Illinois, I felt like our whole state had kind of a late start in terms of getting to the field or getting our plans in place, if you will. So that was a bummer. Also in Illinois, not to feel bad for us, but we had a lot of moisture all season, especially late season, which was a challenge for growers from north to south in the state of Illinois. So pretty much same stories from north to south in terms of growing biomass last year. That said, hopefully things will be different this year. I'm going to come back to a couple points I said earlier. I think it's all about uniform feedstock. The dryer can accommodate a lot of different things as long as it's uniform. A wide range of gradation or simple things like different harvest techniques. When you're trying to plant or harvest a plant that's oil focused and it's a bush plant and you're trying not to bring as much fiber in, but you have to cut low, and guys are using stripper heads, and the stripper heads are trying to pull off the leaves flower, but they're decordiating some of that hemp stalk. We get fiber tears in the feed, which when it's wet, it's not readily visible, but if you take that and just quickly dry it, they're exposed and in the system, that's a challenge. I mean, you could end up, it could make it through the system, but now you've got it in your biomass container, which you don't really want there. So it's coming from the field is a big deal. So we're intently focused on some of the new harvest techniques coming out of the field. Some of these combine systems that can handle the flow pneumatically are really, really promising from a processing perspective, and we're super excited about that. So looking back, a variety of different harvest techniques was a challenge. Hopefully in 2020 here, we can zero in on some better mechanized operations, and I'm optimistic about that. I think what we would do differently regarding dry in 2020 and beyond, I think the whole systematic drying and mid-range processing, I call it, to accommodate these multi-purpose plants is going to be a big deal. So what I mean by that is, maybe when we started, we just said, okay, here's a dryer. We're going to feed flower biomass in the front. We're going to dry it. It's going to come out the back. We'll put it in a storage building with climate control, and it's ready for extraction. Well, it's not ready for extraction. It needs to be sized. It needs to be sized differently if it's going to CO2 or ethanol extraction. Front end, if we've got these multi-purpose plants in the field, will we have less biomass, and do we need to figure out a way to separate the seed out of the flower first? And does it look different coming into the dryer? Is the dryer, can we run the more fiber biomass through? We've done that experimentally, and it works fine if you're intentional about it. So expanding the capacity of the dryer through, I call it this mid-range processing. When it comes out of the field, now we've got to deal with it and have it ready for the next step, whether it's going to oil, it's going to seed, or it's going to go to fiber. Expanding that whole mid-processing range. Hopefully that made sense. It's pretty clear to us in our area going into 2020, but I think the dryer adds some advantage in that options.
Fantastic. That was some really great insight. Thank you, LaVerne. Chip, what were some of your biggest challenges, or what would you do differently?
Sure. Geez. Seems like we have nothing but challenges. We're a farm business. So, you know, first I wanted to touch on something that Devin had mentioned about temperature and temperature variations. You know, we were experiencing those same things, and you know, the duct work for that dryer the hemp is traveling through are 10-inch stainless pipes. You know, and ours are 25 feet off the ground on stanchions, and we have the luxury of going in a straight line because we had plenty of room to work with. So we don't have any curves in ours. But, you know, we were out there working, and, you know, at that time of year is the light change, so the days are shorter. You know, we were noticing that as soon as the sun was going down, because we were always working until 9, 10 o'clock at night, as soon as the sun was going down, those temperatures were just plummeting, and our burners were like working double time to try to keep the temperatures that we were telling it to keep. And we were just fighting it constantly. And so we just went up there, we hired an installation company to come out, and we just wrapped it with bad insulation with, you know, I don't know what they call that foil that goes around the outside of it, solved it. And it would cost us like $1,000, you know? And so just by coming up with that solution, it took that concern away, and we were able to think about other things rather than keeping those temperatures constant. You know, also wanted to mention that, you know, the end result, you know, because this thing spits out, you know, we were running right at that 700 pound an hour mark. And so what do you do with all that hemp that's coming out of there? You know, it's dry. Where do you put it? You know, most people go into bulk bags or super sacks, which is fine, you know, but we had so much quantity that we had to find another solution for those. We were going to have those things coming out of our ears everywhere in every corner of every building, and they're a pain to move those things around. I mean, I don't know if y'all worked with those, but we don't use super sacks at all. We took a page out of the hop industry's book, and I had some fabricators I know build us some baling machines that they use in the hops industry. And then we sourced the bale bags. We actually sourced them out of India, and they're a fraction of the cost of those super sack bags. We're able to then stack, but we get about 150 pounds, 160 pounds of bale. And then we stack 4 bales on a pallet, shrink wrap it. So what you have is in the volume space of 1 super sack, you essentially have the dry weight of 2, and it's stackable. You can handle it with standard material handling equipment like forklifts. It's shipped. You can get a lot more hemp on a truck with those bales. So if anyone has any questions about those, I mean, we get calls from around the country where people ended up with our hemp in a bale and they'd never seen it before, and they're interested in it. And so, you know, that's just wanted to mention that. But, you know, challenges and what we do regarding it differently is we probably would have started earlier. I mean, it's certainly nice to be able to have, you know, a couple of days where you're waiting for harvest rather than that harvest looming down on you. So I would say, you know, we thought we'd started early. I would say just get it done in this time of year versus waiting, you know, and if putting in that order, you know, now versus later, you just get going on it early, work out those kinks in that you're gonna have. You know, that's what I would do, is just do it earlier. That was our biggest challenge and our biggest regret.
That's a great point. Speaking from experience, right? Devin, did you have a similar experience? What were your challenges, or what would you do differently?
It's kind of funny. Our biggest challenge for post-farming, for the drying side of this, was frozen biomass. Customer brought us 300,000 pounds of frozen biomass. And when I say frozen, a core temperature of minus 28 degrees Fahrenheit. So that was a challenge. The way we somewhat solved that problem is we actually added electric dryers over the feed line before the intake of the dryer itself, to start to bring that up to temperature. We had it in buildings warming up over several days before we started to run it through the machines. It doesn't chop well frozen. It will go through the chopper, but it doesn't do it very well. So we had to expand our line specifically for the frozen biomass. He was the only customer that brought it to us that way. He had a grocer warehouse in Maryland that offered him the space, so he decided to freeze his biomass. We've talked him out of that for next year. Hopefully we won't see very much frozen biomass come to us like that. It takes a long time to bring it down to a temperature that you can actually warm up to get through the dryer and chop efficiently. So that was probably our biggest challenge, was just one customer.
That does sound pretty challenging.
Donna, I'd like to jump back on Chip's comments about temperature too. We saw the same thing, and obviously late season in our area, managing the ambient temperature and then how that impacts the operation of the machine, pretty significant. The startup warm-up times, big deal. We had duct work obviously in our hanging in our trusses, so hot air is rising. We were able to contain it, but we still saw a warm-up period required, you know, to bring it up to temperature to operate efficiently. So I think that's probably a key learning. We're glad we had ours inside a building versus erecting it outside of the building. At least we had a bit of a chance, although it wasn't an insulated building, at least we had a chance to stay out of the cold winds, and it served us somewhat. We had doors in our building we literally closed to help contain the heat in it and keep temperatures up. Big deal. So if you're looking at other systems to set them outside, that can be a challenge in the northern climates that we have up here.
Very good points. Very good points. So we took a look back. Let's take a look forward. So what does growth look like for you and your companies? What's some advice that you would give somebody that's looking to get involved in this space, whether that's growing, drying, or anywhere along the supply chain? Let's start with you, LaVerne.
Okay, well, I'll go past the first question. I already mentioned it earlier. I mean, this whole mid-range drying processing for us, I think that's the key in our area. And going to the multi-purpose plant and how do we accommodate that, and just looking at more revenue out of the hemp plant, not just in the oil side of it, but now the seed and the fiber. And we're excited about that, and already doing some things with fiber in our area too. So the advice, here's my take on the advice. This is a little bit about us, Hemp Solution, and our family and our other companies that we have on site. I operate from a business model standpoint, like, don't do it alone. And when you apply that to this whole hemp industry, it only magnifies, it's accentuated. Do not do it alone. So one, have a strong business plan that includes, I call it trusted and transparent partners. And if you can find those that have been down the journey a little bit here, the hemp journey, lock and load with them. I'm not sure about the other guys, but I'm here to tell you, one of my nephews and I were on an airplane a lot in 2018, 19, early 19, just trying to learn from people. And we learned a lot about people. We didn't learn a lot from people. So we probably learned a lot about what not to do and kind of sort that out. So a big deal for me and the companies that I operate is have a strategic plan, but have a strategic plan that includes what we call strategic partners. So that goes from not just the growing side, but that's important. But we looked at it all the way from the seed suppliers on up, and just locked and load with a few trusted people. And I think that's a key. So if you're going to do it, if you're going to go after this, don't do it alone. And if you can, surround yourself with somebody that's been down the road a little bit, albeit in some of our areas, it's only been a year, but there's a lot of learnings if people try to capture the learnings and build from there.
That's some great advice. What about you, Chip? What does growth look like for you, or what's some advice that you would give?
I mean, growth looks like we just want to continue to grow in terms of size and becoming more of the leader in this region. Someone getting into this business, I mean, I guess everyone probably on this call is at a certain level where they're thinking about a dryer, so they're probably not small, 5-acre guy or less, but everything about the hemp business, and there's many different areas, there's all kinds of different people. There's brokers, there's extractors, there's product makers, there's farmers, all kinds of those people. The industry is just so young. A lot of relationships are young. We have met a tremendous amount of people in our 4 years in business, and we have relationships now. Some of our strongest relationships are less than a year old, and that's not common, I guess, in a business situation. And it's just from the standpoint that this industry is just very young. But I guess my best advice is just, like LaVerne said, just, the people that you are working with, that you enjoy working with, and are going to uphold their side of it and have a certain amount of professionalism and capabilities, that's who we work with. We build those, we're building relationships ongoing by having transactions between us that both sides end up satisfied with. And then, there's a history and you move on. And so it's just about forming relationships and moving forward. Our business, we are very open with the community. We have a lot of smaller growers that we work with, and we're hoping to be able to have them be contracted farmers for us at some point. That hasn't happened yet, which we're hoping it would for this year, but it doesn't look like it's going to. But we share, and so in terms of if people come to us and they have a question about something, or they need a small amount of material that we have a large amount of, we're always glad to share. And it's those type of openness and treating it as you're all in it together, not competing with each other per se, is really given us a lot of benefit in the business side of it. So.
Awesome. That is some really great advice. Thank you for sharing.
Sure.
What about you, Devin? What does growth look like for you, or what's some advice that you would give?
So for growth, obviously, as I mentioned earlier, we're looking to expand to a large operation for toll drying in the state of Kentucky. So that's moving forward. We're on that track. And the other part, what the guys are saying is right. If you want to get in this business, if you jump out there and you know nothing about it, it's going to be very difficult. For us, it was we knew guys at Oregon CBD, and we know some of the big farmers up there, and they steered us down a path to get where we are in a year. So don't jump out there thinking that, hey, I can do this on my own, or me and my brother-in-law can go plant 1,000 acres next year and we're going to be millionaires, because it's not going to happen. You're going to need someone to hold your hand. You need to make those relationships. You need to get with some people that have done it and say, what don't I do? That's the most important thing, kind of like what LaVerne said, is learn what not to do. We've all made these mistakes. We've all talked to people that have made mistakes. So if you can avoid those mistakes, you'll save yourself a lot of heartache and probably a lot of money as well.
Great points. And as other states come on and this becomes their very first year, definitely look to the states that did this last year. Look for people coming out of Colorado, coming out of Illinois, coming out of Kentucky, as chances are they did have experience in 2019, and they're probably willing to share that.
Absolutely.
Yep. The last one is, so IEC Thermo, what has your experience with us been, from the brine process to assembly, commissioning, training, after sales support, even though you guys did your own assembly. But in general, how has your experience working with us been? No pressure. LaVerne, go for it. You've been with us probably the longest out of the three, so I'd love to hear your experience.
Okay, well, I'm going to circle back to my last response. I actually kind of set it up for this one. I mean, we're really looking for trusted long-term strategic partners. That's really important to us from our growing side, our farming side, but also from our construction and the hemp solution side. So that's been the baseline. And I just have to tell you that from the equipment suppliers to contractors to even financial institutions, I mean, we apply the same principle. We're upfront before we start a relationship, before we buy something from someone, and we just tell them who we are. Something that's a little bit different for us, perhaps. Maybe it's the same for everyone, but God's blessed us on the journey, and we're here to serve others, and we value relationships. So we name that position as part of our company culture early on. We named it with IEC, and we named it with others that are on the journey with us. So people don't have a surprise like when they get out to see us, like who we are, because that's how we function. And so we're just pretty vocal with that. And that said, IEC has come alongside us. I mean, I'm not even going to start naming names, but I mean, everyone's been a phone call away, a text away. And if we, even in assembly, I mean, there were some things from an engineering standpoint, I thought, man, we could tweak this like right now. And I'm texting, Walter and Drew and like, can we do this? It looks like we need to add a few more feet of pipe here. We can do this. And we made changes in assembly as we went. They were really responsive. So that's the cool part about it. We feel like we got a good partner in this. I think the other thing too about this, I guess I want to just say this because this is our perspective. I mean, the IEC unit's not the least expensive unit out there, but we weren't looking for the least expensive unit. We were looking for the reliable unit. So I think I think we're also looking for a unit that's more broad range and not these isolated kind of brought from something else industry, and it can dry hemp. So I was drawn to the engineering perspective of the whole system, and it made sense. So the team came around us really well, made us feel comfortable in that regard. I think that helped our team move forward going with IEC.
I'm happy to hear that. Chip, how has your experience been with IEC?
Yeah, I mean, everyone that we've been in contact with at IAC has been really professional and wants to help us. And I mean, the closest contact we have is Jeff because he's been on site, so many times. But I mean, I still talk to him pretty regular, about things. And when there were problems that he didn't have an answer for, the answer was usually just a phone call away. And we really enjoy IAC. We're glad that we went with your firm.
I'm really happy to hear that. What about you, Devin?
So with Shane has been our point of contact on the ground, boots on the ground, so to speak. I've had a lot of conversations with Jay Beaudry, and of course, Shauna kind of set us up for this deal and dropped one on us real quick that we weren't expecting. But no, it's been great. With Shane, he's been here 3 or 4 times. He's been to our Kentucky facility, and Walter's been there as well. And we've had no issues with IEC. Every time I've had any questions, like you guys are saying, it's been a phone call. And if it's not answered immediately, it's been answered in 30 minutes, and I get a call back. No matter how busy anyone is, they always want to be responsive to us, and we appreciate that. LaVerne was talking about the cost of the machine. Yet there are definitely cheaper machines out there. There's cheaper ways of doing this, but cheap is cheap. And for us, it was about the best value for what quality product we can get out the end of this machine. And at the end of the day, we feel like it was the best path for us to take was to get this type of machine, and it's the only one that we've seen that will produce these results and the results that we expect.
Awesome input. I'm happy to hear that all of you are very satisfied with your purchases. At this point, I'm going to open it up to the audience. It looks like we've got a couple of questions here. We only have time for 2 questions, just because I wanted to try to keep it as close to that hour as possible. So the first question is, how do you coordinate your toll drying? How long do you allow your wet material to sit before drying? And how is it transported to your plant from the field? Let's go with LaVerne. We'll go right down the line.
Okay, we try to get it through as quickly as possible. Probably no more than a couple hours on the ground in the facility. How's it arrive? Trucks, wagons, whatever here. It's usually in a form ready to go into the dryer. Cool part about this is we had multiple growers, so we have staged areas where a grower could bring biomass in that is ready to run first thing in the morning. Another grower is harvesting, and we keep them isolated, and we'd run for 3 or 4 hours on one client, and they go home to harvest some more. We'd have biomass always sitting in front of us, but we'd segregate it and run it through. So it's received in any form you could think of: trucks, wagons, semis, whatever. So
Perfect. And I think that does have to do with the fact that you're able to receive biomass in different forms, knowing that you have the processes to treat that before it goes into the dryer. What about you, Chip? How do you coordinate your 3 toll drying customers from last year?
Yeah, it was just coordination. It was just communication and just getting it there. We had anything. Well, our largest customer was just bringing us material that was already removed from the stock, so that was pretty easy. We had it coordinated where we would run our own material up to whatever time, and then they would roll in with a trailer full of 55-gallon bins, and we just start running theirs through until it was done, and then we'd shut down for the day. So that worked pretty well. But yeah, we were using box trucks that we have, dump trailers, pretty much anything. Our bucking operation, removing the wet flour from the stock was in a separate building from where the dryer is, and then hence the 90-foot span between the two on the ductwork. But just was coordination. I think we're going to coordinate better this year because I think we'll have more customers. But everyone wants to do it different. I have a spec sheet that I'm working on to avoid differences of opinion in harvest methods. Because just because somebody wants to harvest one way doesn't mean the machine's going to like it. And it's all about the machine liking it. So we're going to have specs that farmers need to follow to harvest and strip their own material. Or, we'll do any service. I mean, if you want us to come get the plants out of your field and bring them, we'll do that. If you want to get them and bring them to us, that's fine too. So it's just per customer basis.
What about you, Devin? How has your experience been?
Well, for us, we had, everything was either pressure baled or frozen. The frozen is not a very good option. The pressure baling seems to be a very good option. Our experience with pressure bales was we saw bales that came to us that had been baled for 90 days and didn't experience loss. They still had all their moisture, no mold. So that was easy for us to run through the machine. We ran it back through the agri chopper, and it ran through the machine just fine. We were able to adjust the temperature and the time to accommodate for the high moisture content. We had some that was 85%, and the dryer handled it without any problems at all. We would prefer to see it in a bale, just for the amount of material that's coming to us. It's better off in a bale with all of its liquid than it would be if you try to store it in a super sack out in the elements or anything like that. The bales will protect it. So we like it in the bales. It's easy to handle. It's easy to store. It's not affected by very much. I can imagine that in the hot part of the summer, since we didn't go through that last year, it might be an issue. I haven't had any results from hot bales yet. And we like LaVerne said, we didn't bring anything in that was hot as far as THC goes either. We tested for that. And if you're bringing that to someone that's not licensed to handle it, it's going to be a problem.
Absolutely. I'm sorry there's a couple more questions on here, but we did run out of time. You will be able to contact the farmers directly. We have provided their email address in the follow-up email we'll be sending you. Thank you so much for attending this week. We are recording it, so we will have it posted on YouTube. A big shout out to LaVerne, Chip, and Devin. Thank you guys so much for joining us. You brought some incredibly valuable insight. Next week, we'll be chatting sort of an extension on a lot of the things we talked about today, especially in terms of feed is key. We do have a special guest next week, Robert Hubener from Colorado Mill Equipment. So we'll be chatting about the importance of feed, how to get your feed in spec, all of that good stuff. So thank you so much for joining us, all the attendees, and then my wonderful panelists as well. I hope you guys have a great rest of your day.
All right. Thanks for having us.
Thanks, guys.
So.